Hey everyone, and welcome again to the AI Nation podcast, the podcast that is all about the German AI startup scene. Today, I have the pleasure to talk with Niclas Lehnert. He's the Chief Operating Officer of PULSTRAIN, and with PULSTRAIN they are developing an innovative battery solution for the automotive industry. I'm really excited what we learn about the connection of software and hardware within that industry. I hope you have a good time. Let's go. Cool. So one intro that is really interesting to me that I wanted to ask you before is, like, you did an apprenticeship is the term, right?
Yes.
As a banker?
Yeah, exactly. It's always hard to translate it into English.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I think in like the Anglistic world, it's
Yeah.
not that common to do such a thing
Yeah.
before your regular job. But yes, I think that's the correct translation.
That's so interesting. Like, I've always wondered what it's like to be a banker. Like, how's the course structured? Like, when you do that, it's like 3 years, right?
Exactly. It's 3 years, kind of depending on what you or where you graduated. And the content is, I would say, comparable to or a mixture of school content. So where you really go to school and have like theory in, I don't know, accounting, then regular banking, also like general topics, how do different products in the banking, what it look like and what's behind them. And the other side is, of course, the practical work, like as a bank counsel in the bank.
Oh.
And this part of the work is like mainly focused and framed by day-to-day business and people who are requesting a service from you or facing any kind of problem, starting from my card isn't working to my online banking isn't working or I forgot my password, so to restore it. And in general, it's when we talk about the apprenticeship and the education you're getting there, I think it's a really, really good preparation if you want to go for management studies or basically anything that has to do something with management, because you get a quite profound financial background, but at the same time, you're also getting lots of insights on how companies are working and how banks are working. And it's not a secret that the economy always depends somehow on money, and money is always connected to banking. So for me, it was really a good starting point to then pursue to management studies.
I just wanted to add that as a question. Probably you also get like really impressive people skills, right? Because you have to do with so different persons and personalities and like a mean of the whole society, right?
Yes.
Everyone comes to a bank.
Yes, definitely. Like really, as you said, everyone comes to a bank. And as you experience this on your own, but you would never go into a bank if you don't have a problem. If you don't have a problem,
True.
You would not like contact the customer support. And almost all the time when someone comes to the bank counter, he is facing some kind of an issue you have to solve. And that, as you said, it gives you a good baseline for how to like deal with different types of people and how to also solve problems in the end. It's like in a bank, everything is about trust, because your customer is expecting 100% of trust level, because no one wants to get his like bank data published in worst case. Or even when you're talking to the people at the bank counter, I mean, it's an open space, so people are requested to keep some distance so that they can't see and hear any word you're talking with the client. And that's why it is really, really important for the bank itself to provide an absolute high level of trust.
That brings me like to another point of your life. You've served in the military, right?
Yes.
Thank you for that, first of all. And what I wanted to ask is, we talked about trust. Trust is a huge thing in the military as well. Can you maybe elaborate for us what are like the huge differences from the bank job that you did later and the military, and what is common? What do they have in common?
The trust point is definitely a thing they have in common, but in a different context, I would say. As a soldier, like on a lower rank, you are kind of trusting everyone who's above you, because in the end, he's giving you the orders. And in this case, you somehow need to trust that the order which he is giving you makes sense in the first place and also provides a benefit to the overall picture. Major difference is that in the military context, it's not so much about like money or a certain service you're requesting or expecting in this type, but rather about that in the worst case, if the decision was wrong or you are executing in the wrong way, then either you or someone else might die. And that makes a huge difference in the decision-making process and also in the responsibility, like everyone who's above you is carrying or you are carrying if you're one of the officers or sergeants. And this is why trust is also extremely important, not only in your group, so the group you are operating in, but also trusting in the leadership that they will always try and keep an extremely high standard of the decision-making process and the decisions they're making, that they're not simply made, but that they thought why they are doing it and what will be the result and what might be the side effects we are facing.
You've summarized that really, really good, actually. I'd like to talk with you about trust later, and maybe give us an insight on how both of these experiences shaped your entrepreneurial journey that came after that.
One major thing you are mainly facing in the army, I would say, is resilience. There is always a super high level of stress, especially if you're in the training areas or in a training situation. It's on purpose, obviously, because combat situations, I never experienced one myself, luckily. But everything that you hear from people who have experienced this, it's probably the highest level of stress you can ever experience. And for this reason, obviously, you're trying to replicate this in any training situation. And trying to make people resilient and preparing them from what's ahead of them, possibly. So learning resilience and how to deal with stress, physical and also mentally, was one thing that helped me a lot, or is still helping me a lot in my founder's path. And the second very important thing is endurance. So nothing happens overnight.
It's a marathon.
It's a marathon. And in the army, it's literally a marathon. Sometimes you really have to walk a marathon with like 20 kilos on your back, with physical stress, with mental stress, bad weather conditions, and someone shouting at you. So even if in the founder space, probably no one is shouting at you and you don't have to carry a heavy backpack. In the end, it's also about endurance, because the goals you're trying to achieve are most of them are long-term orientated, and that's why you need a lot of endurance to really keep the pace and to sometimes also be patient until you're able to reach those goals, to then make the next step and set your next goals. And this was also true for the apprenticeship, because you are really starting at the, I would say, lowest possible point. So you have basically no experience, no work experience, no technical experience. And to like learn all this stuff and also kind of adapt into the environment that you're now part of a working team, sometimes more, sometimes less, requires endurance and also resilience, because sometimes you will face situations, for example, with a customer where you're simply not able either to solve his problem, or he will still not be happy how you solve the problem. So he's requesting and requesting over and over again that you're trying. And this also requires simply endurance and also kind of resilience to really then in the end find a solution that is feasible for both parties, because sometimes, of course, you also need to align with the guidelines of the bank, or there is simply a process that you can't change for single customers.
It's probably, from my perspective, a trick or a tip for everyone, like endurance and patience. Yes, so many people miss out on patience, me as well sometimes. Patience is a major key to life success, I think, and especially as an entrepreneur. So what led you into the world of entrepreneurship then? What sparked the interest in founding a company?
I was, let's say, always interested on not so much working on the corporate side with obviously guidelines, processes, everything you need to run like a proper and big corporation. It was always tempting for me to also have a decision space I can shape on my own. That's also true for the army experience. Because there was always a space where you could decide on your own how to solve the task and how to get from A to B. The only given task was go from A to B, no matter how, but do it. And so I was always looking for an opportunity to integrate this into my professional career. And I luckily had a school friend, Manuel Kuda, who went with me to high school. And our paths spread apart from each other after we graduated. He was still continuing with a technical career. I started my army experience. Kind of by accident, we sometimes met during Christmas time in our home city, because obviously we are from the same area. At one of these occasions, we met again, and he was telling me about what he is currently doing in his PhD thesis. I was listening and I found that was quite interesting because it was connected to the electrification of mobility. Very deep tech and very deep inside of a vehicle. But still, as I also had a major in physics and math, I was always interested, at least in the technical side. So we were talking a bit about the topic and how to maybe also continue with the PhD thesis, because there is also not a secret that a lot of PhD theses, they are read once to put a grain on them, and then, they are left behind and no one will look at them ever again. And he was really convinced that he's working on an important topic, and he was looking for a way to somehow continue this and also bring the topic into a real life context and not only in the lab. We were talking, and he also already did some research on how to continue basically from research to an industrial application. And he was telling me about the opportunity of an Exist Forschungstransfer, which is a German public grant from the government you can apply for if you have a scientific idea or a scientific context and kind of want to try out if this might work as a startup or an industrial application. And we were talking, and it was quite fast clear that we are both motivated to at least try to apply for the grant, because there was nothing to lose. And that was the first door that was opened to an entrepreneurial career, because that was our initial starting point.
So if we summarize that, it was a little bit of a luck. It was a lot of work from both sides, because you've had your own experiences and he had his own experiences, and then you merged it together to find out if you could apply the research on real world applications, on real world problems through the Exist fund. How did you start? Where did you start?
Basically on scratch. So during the application process, you need to write a first business plan, but the major task is to write a project plan. So what you are going to do with the funds you're receiving, and what will be the planned results of the funds you have used. So that was the first thing we had to do, and that was also the first time when we really thought from an industrial perspective on how a potential product, a potential application, potential benefits could look like, and also what could be our business model, and in an extremely early stage and basically on a white paper. So that was the entry point, and this is also something I would say is a really important point, because if you first start talking about your idea, then it's mainly about the idea and is going more into the direction of a vision and less into a direction of how to execute this vision. So whenever you start thinking of how to execute your vision and what it really takes to transfer your ideas into a POC, into a product, and everything that is in between from the idea to sales in like numbers and money from the product, a process that needs to be done. So I would say it's almost impossible to have an idea, execute, and be successful. Might be working on the paper, but in reality, quite hard to execute then. Whenever you start thinking about the product and how it should look like, this also gives you the opportunity to reshape and to also identify potential obstacles you need to overcome, not only from a plain market perspective, but especially on a product perspective in the early stage. This process is kind of guided through the Exist Forschungstransfer program because at first when you apply, you need to write the project plan and then, of course, the business plan. But whenever you started with the project or the program and start working on it, you also have certain times when you need to report your progress. And this also forces you to then re-evaluate on what you're doing. And that helps a lot in this extremely early stage to figure out if the topic you're working on or the product you're working on has really the potential to be an industrial application and to be a product. Because I think that's also one of the reasons why they made the Exist Forschungstransfer, to give the opportunity to evaluate on your idea without having the risk of, on one side, burning your own money, but on the other side, also having a decent amount of resources to seriously evaluate on the product, because it takes time, meaning this takes salaries. But as we are also not only doing software, but also hardware, this really takes money to buy physical stuff that you are burning.
What was one of the moments where you figured out, oh, we're onto something? If you want to share.
It was pretty much half the way during the Exist Forschungstransfer. It's normally it takes 18 months for the first phase. And pretty much at the middle, we've been working a lot and really hard on proving that what we are doing is really able to not only manage batteries, but also is able to move a vehicle from A to B. Because that was never really proven in a prototype. It was always like only proven in the laboratory, which is, I would say, comparably easy. But it was never proven in a vehicle. And it was a late Friday evening. The whole team was working during the whole week on not only doing the mechanical design, but also coding software and working a lot simply to make this vehicle work. And then the test vehicle we used was kind of a beach buddy from Baywatch, I would say. That would be a good fit for it. And on this Friday evening, we were all standing around the vehicle, working, measuring, holding laptops, holding lots of measurement equipment to see that nothing starts burning or killing itself. And then there was the moment when he said, okay, everything is prepared now. Let's turn the key and try if it's working. And one of my colleagues was turning the key and extremely slowly pushing the gas pedal. And for us, unbelievable happened. The vehicle was moving. Very slow. We were very careful because it was in actually inside the office. So we had, I would say, maybe 50 square meters of space to move back and forth. But the vehicle was working. And that was the moment also when it was clear for me, that's going to work.
Maybe let's rewind for the listeners and watchers a little bit. What was the initial problem that you were working on and like the first mission that you had?
The PhD Manuel was working on was about unconventional approach of how to manage battery cells in electric vehicles. So you have to imagine every electric vehicle, starting from a scooter, ending in an electric aviation application, needs a system that is managing the batteries, not only energy-wise, but also safety-wise. Because if you don't have it, then it's very likely that your battery starts burning, and that's the case no one wants to see. Not in a car, not in a scooter, and especially not in nowhere. He was working on an application that combines an electronics component and a software component to, in the first place, manage the batteries safety-wise and energy-wise. And the special thing about it is that because of the design of the hardware and the components that are used and the corresponding software that is used, it also have the ability to not only manage the batteries, but also move the vehicle and charge the batteries. So you're basically combining three functionalities that are currently separate in separate components and separate technological solutions into one solution, one electronic solution, and also integrating the solution inside the battery pack. So you have a strongly integrated system, which is easier to applicate in different vehicle applications and is way, way stronger focused on software than on hardware. And the major point why electric vehicles are so expensive, electronics and different components and the complexity you basically have in them, and that you're solving most of the problems rather on the hardware and less on the software side. And we are working on a solution that is changing this perspective to solve the problems more on the software and less on the hardware side, having an implication on, of course, costs, but also efficiency and longevity of the battery cells.
I can really just imagine how it was when he started the vehicle and it started moving, and all of you were like, "Oh damn, this is working." This is a revolution, right, for the EV industry. It really is a major turning point, right? Or could be a major turning point, right? Like from an outsider's perspective, so you've managed to bring three different systems that normally are not communicating in an efficient way with each other into one, and adding us like a software layer, creating like a hybrid approach, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's really interesting. So what happened after that? Like the vehicle moved. What were the next steps? You figured out, wow, we're really onto something.
So when we figured out, okay, that's really working what we're doing here, and this really has the potential to grow.
Thanks for joining us for the first part of this episode. We hope you enjoyed the discussion so far. If you're ready to keep the conversation going, part 2 is already available right here in the playlist. We appreciate you listening, and we can't wait to have you back for the rest of the story.